What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. We are doing a very special mid-afternoon college football live show with my friend Shehan Jeyarajah, who is insider at Dave Campbell Texas Football. Shehan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on.
Nah, man, this is fun. I'm glad that you were able to get on with me because I want to talk about the personnel changes across the Big 12 and really college football because I've thought that the SEC West Division is like the deepest that I've ever seen among college football coaches ever. And it's fascinating. I wish it was its own conference, and it kind of is because it's a division. But then, right in at your alma mater over Baylor, you've had tremendous changes. And I know that you got to be excited about Dave Aranda, but right now I was thinking nobody needed spring practice. Like Baylor needed spring practice. So, how do you think all of this bodes for Aranda, Larry Fedora? I mean, Joe McGuire is a known commodity over there, but also Jorge Munoz and those guys.
Yeah. You know what's funny? So I was working on some previews in our magazine today, where we obviously preview the entire state of Texas. And I was talking to Blaine Morgan, the new coach over at Lamar, and the funny thing about all this, right, is for any new coaches, and there's a couple of them in Texas, obviously, at the top level, like you mentioned, Dave Aranda and over at UTSA as well. Like, it must be so hard right now just to know that you don't have time to install, like, at all. All of this basically has to be done virtually. All of this has to be done over Zoom. Like, you don't actually get to practice this stuff. And a lot of these coaching staffs that came in our brand new staffs, they didn't necessarily start spring practices early, because there are some schools that did start spring practice early. I know that there was an article up that a lot of North Carolina schools do that, but man, again, you're talking about Baylor obviously being in a position where they started practice late. UTSA was going to start practice late. It's a tough situation, and I think, especially for a coaching staff that's going to bring a lot of new stuff in. Now you do have the advantage of having a pretty strong team culture. You have a pretty experienced team, especially on offense coming back, but like schematically, they are going in a very different direction than what Matt Rule had there, especially on offense. I mean, offensively, they're going to be more of a spread system than they were. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be a really tough situation for any new coaches, but especially one who's a first-time head coach like Dave Aranda.
Yeah, I hadn't really given that a whole bunch of thought, him being a first time head coach as opposed to being, a head coach once again, but he's surrounded himself with what I think are really good coaches. I mean, Larry Fedora has obviously worn that head coaching hat, and Joey McGuire knows how to build something from the ground up in high school, and there were many folks that wanted him to get the head coaching job. It's a really big deal that he was able to, that Aranda was able to hold on to McGuire, because I know even Oklahoma was reaching out to try to put him on staff. I wonder what it must be like for some of these players that are coming back, because the the style of offense and defense that they played, I don't know that it's going to change a whole lot defensively, at least from a personnel standpoint, but offensively, it feels like they're going in an entirely different direction. And yeah, you got Charlie Brewer, but is that the guy? I mean, Jacob Zener looked good in the Big 12 championship to me, but I mean, you would be, I think, the expert to ask about that.
Yeah, well, actually, I think that Brewer actually fits what Larry Fedora wants to do better than almost anybody. Like, I think that he's going to benefit perhaps more than anybody from this change, because, what he was being asked to do for really the entire Rule era was be a pro-style pocket passer. Now, the first 2 years, the offensive line wasn't good enough for them to even be able to try that. But I actually think that having a coach like Larry Fedora, who's creative, who wants to get his quarterback in motion, who wants to spread things out a little bit, quicker passing game, adding some aspects like that, I think that's going to be a really good fit for Charlie Brewer, because, look, this is a guy who has a good arm. He doesn't have that sort of that rocket arm. Like, I think that when you look at what Baylor did the last couple of years, Jacob Zeno is a better fit for that, because he has sort of that field awareness. He sort of has that strong arm. He's got accuracy. But Charlie Brewer is used to playing in a spread offense from his time at Lake Travis High School. And I think that this is actually going to be a really good fit for him to work with a guy like Larry Fedora, who obviously, created great offenses during his time at North Carolina, produced Mitchell Trubisky, made him into a top 5 pick, regardless of whether he should have been there or not. Got some great stuff out of Marquise Williams before him. Larry Fedora is a guy who I honestly think was legitimately in the conversation to become the head coach at Baylor back in 2016. Now, Matt Rule is obviously a better choice, but But I think that now him coming in as a coordinator and getting to work with Charlie Brewer and getting to work with a really fantastic room, even if a little unproven of skill position talent, I really think that this offense is going to come together if they have the time to start installing. That's really going to be the big question is how are they going to do that, since they won't be able to have most of spring practice most likely. But I think personnel-wise, I think that it fits very well to what Larry Fedora wants to do.
You know, you bring up a good point about Fedora and the quarterbacks that he's had, because he hasn't had a quarterback as talented as Charlie Brewer before. I'm saying that. You're not saying that. But Zach Robinson ain't it. Chris Leak ain't it. Mitchell Trubisky probably benefited the most that anybody's ever benefited from having Larry Fedora calling plays for him. So on the one hand, I'm very excited about this because, again, you mentioned Lake Travis, 52 points a game they scored. He set the national record for completion percentage of 77.4% passing through like 60 touchdowns or whatever it was, and won a 6A state championship. On the other hand, I'm worried about his health because Max Olson wrote about this in The Athletic earlier this morning, saying, hey, look, he wanted everybody to know that, yeah, he got laid out in the Sugar Bowl, and yeah, he laid there motionless for a long time, and yeah, he got carted off the field and didn't return to the game, but you know what? It was a stinger. And I'm going, I don't believe you, man. Like, sorry. I just don't. And I know what he meant to that team, and I know he was playing hurt for the last quarter of the season, but is he going to be the guy if he's not fully healthy, or if they think that for whatever reason at the worst now we're talking about Charlie Brewer being injury prone. At best, we're talking about injury prone. At worst, we're talking about maybe having to go to another guy.
Yeah, and I think that that's definitely going to be a big question, not just over the offseason, but even heading into next season. He just can't keep taking these hits. And that is, again, an area where I think that playing in a spread offense is going to help him a little bit. You're going to take a few less sort of direct hits, even if you still get hit a decent amount, versus playing sort of in a pocket sort of situation. But yeah, he can't withstand that. He's not a huge guy. He's gained a lot of muscle over the past couple of years, but he's still not, Jalen Hurts. He's still not Sam Ehlinger. He's not somebody who's built to take a million hits. And yeah, I think that one thing that I think that Larry Fedora and Dave Aranda and Jorge Munoz and everybody there is going to have to really communicate to him is, man, you just got to slide sometimes. You just got to run out of bounds sometimes. You just got to let this play go sometimes. And I think that, again, this system, I think, is conducive to doing that. But look, if he's going to keep getting hit the way he has the last couple of years, he's not going to make it through the season.
Switching gears, you brought up Jalen Hurts and Sam Ehlinger, two guys that, after watching the 2019 season, I think are totally the same. And I think, Tim Tebow's like, I invented who these guys are. But on that tip, is Sam Ehlinger the best player in the Big 12 conference?
So I think that there's a couple different ways to think about that question. Like, I think that he is the most valuable player in the conference. I think that he's the guy, because he's the guy with the ball in his hands, right? I think that having a great quarterback is more valuable than almost anything that you can have on the field. If you have to pick one player to start a team, you're going to try to pick a quarterback. Now, if you're talking about best player, Chuba Hubbard, what he did last year at Oklahoma State, I think that he is the best player returning in the Big 12. The efficiency he was able to keep, even after, having to basically be the only center point of that offense after losing Tylan Wallace and Spencer Sanders, and still averaging 6 yards a carry. That is ridiculous stuff, right? That's insane. But, when you adjust for the relative level of quarterback versus running back in terms of importance to a team, I think Sam Ehlinger is the more valuable player, and I think he's as good as people kind of say he is. Not that he's going to win the Heisman or anything like that, but he is legitimately a game-changing quarterback. But if you're going to say the best overall player in the Big 12, I think that there are a couple other guys in that conversation.
I'm glad you brought up Chuba Hubbard because 2,094 yards, any 2,000-yard milestone is tremendous. And we had 3 2,000-yard backs last year. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor, and, of course, Hubbard. And it's an outstanding year because none of those guys are even, finishing runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. However, you brought up Chuba Hubbard having to carry the offense. And I wonder if that's more about Spencer Sanders, who'd been a turnover machine, and simply, you lose a Tylan Wallace. I get that because Tylan Wallace was basically a magnet. He would throw the ball up and then Tylan would go get it. But I would say Tylan Wallace is the best player in this conference, short of Sam Ehlinger, because of what he's been able to do over the last couple of years. But I think that perhaps, as you brought up, with the most valuable player in the quarterback at Texas, and quarterback being the position that you want to build around, maybe that's just not going to be the case because you can hand the ball to Chuba Hubbard and because Charlie Dickey's going to be coaching the offensive line. I think that's an understated part of what they're doing. But I want to continue to dig at Texas because they return so much and they're so talented. I mean, Ehlinger's one thing, but I love Epps, I love Eagles, I love Jake Smith. I'm not a big fan of Keontae Ingram, but I like what Roschon Johnson was able to do. I love Bijan Robinson, and I like Chris Ash coaching the defense, even with Mike Yurcich doing some version of what he did at Oklahoma State. Is it the team to beat in the Big 12 this year, or are we looking at Oklahoma being All-State in Rhode Island again?
Look, here's my sort of thought process when it comes to that question. Until Oklahoma doesn't win the Big 12, I can't pick them to not win the Big 12, right? Like, I mean, that's just sort of my mindset going in. Now, look, Oklahoma's got a lot to replace. They got to replace Jalen Hurts. They got to replace CeeDee Lamb. They got to replace Kenneth Murray. They got to replace Neville Gallimore. Like, they have a lot more to replace, I think, than the other two teams who I think will really sort of be in that top tier, Oklahoma State and Texas. I think it's going to be a 3-team race. And look, what that means is that somebody's going to be very mad to be left out of the Big 12 title game. You know, whether it's Sam Ehlinger in his senior year, whether it's Chuba Hubbard in his last year, you know, one of Mike Gundy's best teams, and obviously whether it's Oklahoma, where, you know, you can kind of buy those Big 12 title game tickets at the beginning of the year because they just keep coming back. But, you know, I think that Texas is in that conversation. But for me, if I had to pick right now, I think that they are probably – I think that it's going to come down to that last game of the season, Texas versus Oklahoma State in Stillwater on Black Friday. I think that it's going to come that late in the year. And look, any one of these three teams can win the conference, in my opinion, but just because Texas has to go to Stillwater this year, I say that right now they're leaning more towards third than they are to first right now.
I'm interested in Texas's defense, not just because Chris Ash is coming in and basically Tom Herman is trying to recreate some sort of magic that he had at Ohio State, even if he's not the play caller, with Ash calling the shots on defense. But they return a bunch of guys that got playing time that didn't expect to get playing time. They get a healthy Caden Stearns back. I love Deshaun Jameson. I like Anthony Cook. I think that Tyler Owens is a star waiting to happen. Is it going to challenge for the best defense in the Big 12 this year? Even as, you know, Kansas State's going to be Kansas State. Texas Christian's always Texas Christian. And I'm not sure what Dave Aranda thinks he's going to be able to do, but you want to bet on him because he's a great strategist. But I don't know enough about what they return after watching what they lost.
Yeah, well, I'll say that I don't think that Baylor's going to be in the conversation for best defense necessarily. It's just going to take time. They lose 9 starters on defense. There's a ton of talent behind them, and they're going to rotate a lot, which I think will help. But I don't see them being in that conversation. But to me, I mean, when you look at the defensive backfield that TCU has right now, I think that they are probably the best defense in the conference next year. And look, when you have Gary Patterson, it's always going to be that conversation, right? It's always going to be, okay, you know, maybe they're a piece away. Maybe they're the guys of being the best defense in the conference and one of the best in the country. Now, Texas, again, the talent is obvious, right? The talent is completely obvious. They still had a lot of issues at cornerback last year, and you do bring everybody back, but you still have to get a little bit more sort of a judge of their production before you can really say anything definitive. Look, I mean, I'm very curious to see how their move to a 4-man front ends up affecting things because I was very unimpressed by their pass rush last year. They got a lot of talented guys out there, but it just never really came together. And now with the issues that they have at linebacker too, you know, you thought maybe Joseph Osai was going to be able to just be sort of a rusher, which I think would be a good fit for him. But now he might have to come back and play linebacker because they're just so shallow at that position. They got all the pieces. I mean, obviously, you know, nobody needs to tell anybody how good Texas recruits. But you know, until I sort of see some of that production from specifically D-end, before I see the depth at linebacker and before I see the performance at cornerback, I just can't have them in that conversation quite yet.
So, talking about Texas Christian, I kind of think that Gary Patterson and Bill Belichick are the same person in that they care intensely about defense. They will put together a competent defense, if not a great defense, year after year after year, and could give a damn about who's playing quarterback. You know, I say that because Bill Belichick's like, cool, you want to walk, Tom? Walk. Fine. I'll find somebody else. And you know what? I'm not in a hurry to find your heir apparent because I want a playoff game with Vinny Testaverde throwing more touchdowns or more interceptions than touchdowns with the Browns. I'm not really interested in who my quarterback is. And for Texas Christian, we always say they're a quarterback away. They've been a quarterback away basically forever. And when Trayvon Boykin had a great season, they were unstoppable. They got shafted out of being able to play in the playoff. So I'm always looking at them going, yes, Ross Blacklock probably needed to come back. Losing LJ Collier hurt more than I thought it would for them. But I got a hard time betting against Sweaty Gary if Max Duggan is worthwhile. And I don't know if I have Sonny Cumbie to blame for that or Max Duggan. But then again, Max Duggan had to call Gary Patterson up and ask him if he could come visit. So I don't know what to do with that team because they just don't care about the most important position on a football field.
Yeah, well, the thing that I think is most damning about that team, the 2019 team specifically, is that they have like 6 or 7 guys who might be top 60 draft picks.
Yes.
That's insane. To look at all the talent that they're losing from that team, obviously Lucas Niang gets hurt. That sort of thing that happens. I think that both those running backs, Shewa Lonalua and Darius Anderson, could be guys that last in the NFL for a long time. And they were kind of just okay at TCU, and that's kind of the story right now with a lot of TCU's rosters, that they've got a lot of guys who they didn't get the most out of, even though, they sort of played at a high level. And that's on both sides, honestly. I mean, I think that even on defense, Ross Blacklock's another guy who I think, he could be a top 60 draft pick. I agree. He should have come back to school. But last year he didn't get the most out of them. And that's a little surprising to me. Now, I think that when you look at their 2020 team, they're going to be, I think, potentially, I don't want to say worse than offense because you hope that Max Duggan, obviously takes a step, but you lose Jalen Reagor.
Yeah.
You lose your 2-star running backs. You lose the only really good offensive lineman that they had. And look, I am still very much on the fence about Max Duggan. I think that he's got a lot of tools, but the fact that he has to play last year at all when he is clearly so raw, that's a bad situation for me. And I think that Sonny Cumbie's a good coach, but I just don't know if he's a good fit for what they have. And on top of that, I just am curious how much Gary is kind of in Sonny Cumbie's ear telling him, I want you to play like this. I don't want you to play like this. I don't want you to do this. It's just hard to really know. And they didn't really do anything to improve the offense this offseason. They obviously bring in, Doug Meacham back again to coach receivers, but what influence will he have? He obviously was there when they were doing all that stuff with Trayvon Boykin, but he's not necessarily going to be doing that in his current role. And they bring in Jerry Kill as an off-field coach to kind of run the offense. I don't even know what that is. What does that even mean? I have no clue. And so for me, I just don't even know what to expect necessarily next year. Again, I think that Sonny Cumbie's a good coach. I think Doug Meacham's a good coach. I think that Jerry Kill is a good coach who makes no sense in this situation. But I just don't really know what to expect from that offense. The defense will be great, but where do you even go on that offense?
No, man, and I'm interested to know what the hell Jerry Kill is supposed to be doing too. Joe Brady gets hired by LSU. TCU counters with Jerry Kill. I mean, I get how offensive assistants and these coordinator titles are, in vogue. Scott Linehan's going to take over for Joe Brady. Jorge Munoz is going to do something other than coach wide receivers. Cool. Whatever it is, how you build it out. But I don't know how Jerry Kill makes you better, and that's off-putting to me. I'm looking at how the landscape is right now. Nobody's getting to spring practice. Probably won't see any spring games. So I'm putting an emphasis right now on returning production. Guys that are known commodities on their teams, but also the returning staff of many of these coaching staffs, because everybody is going to suck in September. Everybody's going to be sloppy. Everybody's going to be bad. But I think you have a way of mitigating that if you're returning the bulk of your coaching staff and returning the bulk of your team. So I was taking a look at Bill Connolly's returning production statistics, and I want to run these by you. At near the top is Houston. 93% of their defense, 73% of their offense, 83% overall. I expect Clay Tooney to be the guy at quarterback. I like what they have at wide receiver. I like what they have at running back. I understand they lost their 5-star transfer from Alabama, but it feels like this is their year in the American if there was ever a year, even as Memphis, I think, is poised to just be right back there again in the American Championship game.
Yeah, here's the issue with Houston, all right? I don't know if you've taken a look at their schedule right now, but holy crap. It is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
But give me just a second. Okay, so they start off with Rice, easy enough. Then they go to Washington State.
Yep.
They go to Memphis. They host North Texas, which should be fine. Tulane should be fine. BYU is going to be kind of a tough game on the road. Then Navy, UCF, Cincinnati. South Florida's fine. At SMU, it's tough. And then finish with Tulsa. Like, it's a tough schedule, man. You get, again, Washington State in the non-conference, which is probably going to be a loss. You get BYU in the non-conference. That probably is going to be a loss. And then, again, UCF, Navy, Cincinnati, and SMU. I mean, it's honestly kind of hard to figure out, where their wins are going to come from, especially with so many of those games coming on the road. Now, maybe they're just so much better that it's okay, that, they end up being fine. But, like, I don't know. It's kind of hard not to find 4 or 5 losses to start with on that schedule. Now, if 2 of them are BYU and Washington State, that's fine because they're not conference games. But, like, man, to have to play all of those teams in 1 year, like, if they go through and win 9 or 10 games, like, my God, they will have completely earned it because it's an absolutely brutal stretch. Now, I do think the improvement will come. I actually think that Clayton Tune is a pretty good fit for what Dana Holgorsen wants to do, maybe even better than Derek King. But, like, still asking that offense to take a big step forward with, Clayton Tune now sort of, I guess he's a true junior at this point, which is kind of wild based on how his career has gone. But, like, nobody has a whole ton of sort of big time experience on that offense. And I don't know. It's just hard to see where exactly the production comes from.
Okay. All right. I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to put on a cape for Houston right quick. All right. I'm going to do this. Rice, we agree, right? Washington State, Nick Rolovich is the head coach now. Not Mike Leach. Right. Yeah, I know. Nick Rolovich coming from Hawaii. They needed to be able to put in a scheme. They're not able to put in a scheme. You get them early. Everybody's going to be crappy in September. I think that they could get that W. So I'm going to go 1-1 there.
Hey, let me point out.
Okay.
Mountain West Division champion Hawaii. Let's have some respect now.
Hey, man, Cole McDonald and his tattoo and his mini tattoos. Like, I picked Hawaii to cover against Arizona last year in, like, week 2. And I was so excited that they came through for me. Because, like, yes, everybody's buying into a Khalil Tate that is not going to be here this time. And that was totally wrong because he nearly came back and won that game. But, all right, cool.
Don't get me started on Arizona.
So, I got 1-1 for Houston coming into, or 2-0. Let's go 2-0. And then Memphis, all right, I'll give that an L because I love Brady coming back. Brady White is coming back. I love being able to have, Kenneth Gainwell might be the best tailback nobody is able to talk about because, well, Patrick Taylor came back late and we had such dynamic running back play last year. North Texas, let's call that a win. So you're 3-1 going into October. The Green Wave, you ought to be able to get that a win. So you're 4-1 at BYU. Let's say that that's tough, and I'd make that a pick 'em, but for the sake of argument, let's call it an L, right? So 4-2. Navy lost its Magic Man. You don't have to deal with Malcolm Perry anymore, right? So they're gonna have to start somebody new. I'm gonna call that a win. Yeah. Well, in October, it's not a week removed from. Well, I don't think they have a bye going into that game. Otherwise, Navy might be something different. UCF, that's gonna be interesting. Because Central Florida was good last year. It had no business losing to my alma mater, Tulsa, but they potentially are going to start Mackenzie Milton at quarterback, and I'm not going to bet against him.
Yeah, we'll see, man. I won't believe that Mackenzie Milton's ready until he's out there. But Dylan Gabriel's still really good if he's not ready.
Right. So Cincinnati, that's going to be tough. Luke Fickell was able to retain Marcus Freeman, which is a really big deal for me. I love Marcus Freeman as a defense coordinator. I hope he gets a head coaching job soon. So UCF win, SMU, okay, Bouchel's back, but you got a new offense coordinator. You might run a different version of it. I mean, I get it's Lincoln Riley's little brother, but they're not the same person, and you lose James Prochet. I believe Xavier Thomas is returning, right? Or not Xavier Thomas.
Xavier Jones is out.
Jones.
He's gone.
But okay.
You do bring back Reggie Robertson, who I think is maybe the best receiver in Texas next year.
Ooh, well, let's unpack that in a second. And then
Yep.
Golden Hurricane, I don't know, man.
You better win that game.
I mean, like for my Hurricane. Yes, you better win that game. But I'm like, defensive backs over there are pretty good, so maybe they'll give them a tune-up. But not like it feels like they could be 1-3 in this. Is what I'm saying. I think they could finish 1-3 in the American.
Yeah, and look, obviously going against Tulsa, you got to go against Baylor legend Zach Smith.
Oh God,
it's never an easy situation.
Man, look, I live here. I do radio here. I went to school there, and I'm just constantly on Monty's case because he doesn't recruit any of the kids from the area. He's just going to Texas to get everything, and then you put together a 4-8 season. I'm gonna be upset about it, as alumni.
Right.
So I mean, Houston was one of those teams that I wanted to pick on because, of course, you cover the state of Texas, the entire state of Texas. But who do you think? And I'm gonna kind of hit on it and kind of gave one away. Who are the 3 best players in the state of Texas right now?
Okay, 3 best players in the state of Texas.
Across any region, FCS. You can go to Tarleton State if you need to.
All right. That might get a little too crazy.
Okay.
I think that Tarleton is losing a lot, so we'll at least put that in context. No, I mean that is the thing that kind of sucks is that sort of the good teams from the sub FBS are losing their best players. So unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to pick a sub FBS player, but I think Sam Ellinger's on that list. I'm not saying he's 1 or 3, but I think he's on that list. It actually kind of gets kind of hard.
Okay.
I do think that Shane Buechele is also on that list.
Okay.
He was a game-changing quarterback for SMU last year. I mean, he came in through for nearly 4,000 yards, completely changed the culture of that team. I mean, was everything and more that they could have possibly hoped. The third one is tough. I mean, I mentioned Reggie Robertson. I'm not saying that he's necessarily on the list, but he is really, really good. There's a 1,000-yard rusher returning in the state, and he plays at UTSA and played in a very bad offense last year, Sincere McCormick. I mean, he's the best running back in the state right now. If you're going to go pound for pound, I mean, he is.
Oh wow,
he is a really, really good player. Yeah, at UTSA, and again, I mean, you're talking about UTSA's offense the last couple of years. Oh my God, it's been horrific. Like he's not getting a whole lot of help, but he still rushed for 1,000 yards and averaged 4.5, 5 yards a carry. I can't remember exactly. So he's definitely in the conversation. I think obviously you have to include like Caden Stearns in the conversation, Garrett Wallow, Terrell Bernard. I think all those guys are in the conversation, but I don't know. Picking the number 3 guy is pretty hard, but it's probably one of those guys.
Okay, all right. I'll let that go. Let's change it up just a little bit because covering the state of Texas, that means you cover a variety of conferences, including the Southeastern Conference, Big 12, what have you, American. What team are you most excited to watch for your own benefit? Not one that you would be covering, not one that you would necessarily be writing about. So perhaps a team from the Pac-12, Big 10, or ACC in there, a team that you're just excited to see what they're able to do.
Ooh, that's a good question. Let me go to my handy dandy list of teams because there's a lot of teams in this world, obviously.
Well, yeah, I mean we got 130 FBS teams, man. Yeah.
I am excited to see. Again, this is a team that I cover, but I am excited to see what SMU has coming back because they lose a lot of production, but at the same time, I mean, I'm interested to see what they got. Actually, one team that I'll mention because they have a couple of Texas connections now is the U, Miami.
Oh.
They bring in Rhett Lashley at offensive coordinator. They bring in De'Aaron King at quarterback. 2 guys who obviously people from the state are very familiar with. I'm curious, right? Because their schedule's not that hard, right? Like they get to Michigan State in the non-conference. I think that's a winnable game. Temple, Wagner, UAB. I think those are all winnable games. And the division's not very good. I mean, Virginia Tech's going to be the big team that you're obviously fighting against. But I don't know. I think that the situation is there for them to be able to go and compete at the highest level. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be top 10 good necessarily, but there's a lot of potential there. And obviously talent-wise at Miami, that's never going to be an issue. And another team in that division, actually, North Carolina. I think that Sam Howell is a superstar. I think that Sam Howell is an absolute game changer. And look, I need to see whether this is real or whether this is Sam Howell and Mac Brown took people by surprise. But for me, I think that those are 2 teams that right away are going to be super duper intriguing right from the start.
I'm so with you on North Carolina and whatever it is they're going to be because I've thought since the end of the season they are a sleeper pick in the ACC. I mean, the way that they played Clemson, the way that they were a score away from beating a team that played for a national title, the way that Mac Brown has been recruiting. I mean, you flip the only quarterback committed to Alabama in 2021 class to North friggin' Carolina. And then I want to check this, but I'm fairly certain that if you look at the top 10 recruiters among the 2021 class right now, you'll see like 5 Ohio State coaches, because the level that they're recruiting on is ridiculous. Just, I mean, they're stupid. They could put together statistically the best class that we've ever seen. But also in there is defensive coordinator Jay Bateman for North Carolina. Right. And I'm going, wait a second, the dude from Army that you hired? I mean, their defense was good, but my goodness. And then I looked at who they got in the boat, and I'm going, oh crap, 2021, they're going to be a monster if they're not already in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that all of us, I mean, everybody who watches Big 12 football, and it's from this reason we're curious. I mean, there's a difference between being Mac Brown recruiting at Texas and Mac Brown recruiting somewhere that's not Texas, right? I mean, that was even something that I heard to some extent, like back when back when Baylor was open, was like, should we go after like a Les Miles or Mac Brown type? And I'm like, look, it's completely different being Mac Brown, at Texas versus somewhere else. And honestly, I kind of laughed a little bit when he took over at North Carolina, because I was just like, I don't really know what the plan is there. And like you mentioned, I mean, the staff hires have been phenomenal. I think that both coordinator hires have been phenomenal. Getting Sam Howell is obviously a game changer there. I mean, that's really the thing that I think is taking them to a different level. But like, look, there is talent in that Atlantic Coast region. And I think that there hasn't been a program that's done a great job other than Clemson of really, really leveraging that talent. And all of it's kind of gone to the SEC otherwise. And now I think you got a team in North Carolina that has been able to sell people that, hey, obviously I think that basketball is always going to come first and foremost, but like, we have the resources, we have the support, we have the fan support, we have the players. We can actually build something here if you really, really want to try. And I've been very impressed by them. Yeah,
man, I'm just going to roll through the 2021 recruiter rankings right quick. Number 1, Brian Hartline, Ohio State. Number 2, Tony Alford, Ohio State. Then you got Chris Herring at Wisconsin. Number 4, Kerry Combs, Ohio State. And then Jay Bateman, number 5, North Carolina. Wow. Stephen, right? North Carolina. Like, Miami's in here at 6 with Stephen Field. And then Christian Robinson at Florida. Larry Johnson, Ohio State. Al Washington, Ohio State. David Turner, Florida. So, like, when you look at this and you say which one of these is not like the other, and you see Jay Bateman, I got to give this line up to Kurt Bowles at the Austin American Statesman, or Statesman American. Which is it? I can't even confused.
American Statesman. American Statesman.
Thank you. He said, when Mac Brown has coordinators, he's golden, because he's going to recruit. And the way that, again, it's North Carolina, man. Like it's a basketball school. You're not supposed to be this good. And then I look at some of the kids that he's enticed to come there, and the way that he's selling them on the program, and the way that he's able to just let Phil Longo and Jay Bateman just do what they do and stay out of their way. And you mentioned it, right? You started off with this, with Sam Howell being flipped from Florida State. That should have been our first indication. Now, Florida State was a dumpster fire, is a dumpster fire, and I have faith that Mike is going to get it turned around over there. I love Mike Norvell. He was a GA when I was a senior at TU. So, I mean, I've known him for some time, going back to cornrows in Central Arkansas. But Sam Howell should have never gone to North Carolina, and he wouldn't have if Mac Brown was not there. So that's a really great pick. I want to talk a little bit about recruiting, just a bit, and just running through the 2021 rankings real quick. I mean, Ohio State is clearing away the favorite by 48 points over Clemson at number 2, which I've never seen before. I've never seen this kind of gap, even this early. And then Texas at number 8, and it's kind of where I'm going with this right now, right? Texas has 6 commits in the 2021 class. And then if you keep scrolling, you get to Oklahoma at 26. And then I've been having a lot of fun with this one on the channel. Show me where Alabama is in the rankings, right? And you got to keep going, and you got to keep going, and you got to keep going, because they only have one guy in the boat. And
wow.
Yeah.
I just scrolled all the way down. They're at 54 right now.
Right. And that's bonkers. And the guy that they have in, I think, is going to be outstanding. I mean, he's been compared to C.J. Mosley. He's coming out of Mobile Christian. Deontay Lawson is that dude. But this feels like a moment. This feels like a moment where you could pull away because nobody's been in this dead period before. We're looking at a dead period that's going to last through April 15th. And I feel like if you wanted to do it, if you wanted to be on the phones, and this would be where I would ding Matt Rule, he was the guy that's saying, I'm not going to be on the phone with recruits. I'm going to be with the guys that are here. I'm going, yeah, that's why your recruiting class is ranked 10 out of 10. But looking around, who do you think could make a move? Because, I mean, Texas Tech, you were on the brink. You had a bunch of close games. Probably should have beat that same Baylor team that ended up playing for a Big 12 title. But I'm looking at Iowa State at 37. You have opportunities to do what North Carolina has done. Who do you think is in a position right now to really capitalize on this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think that you obviously have to think about some of the programs that have really strong relationships in this state, right? Especially when you're talking about Texas specifically. Like you mentioned Texas Tech. There is a program that gets out there really early. They get a lot of offers out right away. Because a lot of programs like Alabama, even Ohio State now, Ohio State's obviously doing a great job, but like, they kind of wait. They kind of come in and pluck the guys that they want later, especially some of the schools like Ohio State that recruit nationally. But, if you're Texas Tech, right, like you are a program that is already around always, right? Like you're already, giving out offers when guys are freshmen and sophomores. And that was something that I think that Cliff Kingsbury did a great job of was identifying that talent early. And I'm really curious to see because like you mentioned, I mean, having this dead period early, you're losing obviously some evaluation period along with that. And I think that in a funny way, 2021 might be one of the, I guess for lack of a better phrase, one of the less well recruited or evaluated classes, I guess.
For sure. Yeah.
And so if you are a program like Texas Tech right now, if you do have, a guy like Joey McGuire on staff now, not that I'm saying Baylor, but like if you do have one of those guys, I think, talking about a group of 5 team, UTSA, with Jeff Traylor, a guy who knows everybody in this state. I think that's where you're really going to be able to make some bread is if you do have one of those coaches and one of those staffs that's really good at evaluating early. And I think, like you mentioned, Iowa State's one of those staffs. I think Kansas State has obviously done a really good job of that. These sorts of staffs that get in early, that identify early, that really know what they're looking for. And look, because I think that there's going to be a little bit of a mad dash when it comes to the fall, because we don't have all these players committed. We're not having these junior days where everybody's committing now, and I think that will in some ways hurt some of these top schools because, they're going to be able to come in and scoop up guys that they want, but they're not going to have as much film, as much tape, as many camps. I mean, we don't even know how this is going to affect the camp circuit, obviously. I think that those are really going to be the schools that, the big schools I think are going to have a slight disadvantage versus some other years because they're not going to be able to get around quite as much. Now, again, Ohio State's already number one, and they already got 14 kids. I mean, they obviously, are figuring it out just fine. But I am curious to see what the schools like Alabama and some of those really top-end schools, look, is their evaluation going to be quite as good as it has been in previous years?
Yeah, I think they might lean more on being able to swoop in late after everybody else has done their evaluations. I give 2 stories real quick because one, you brought up Iowa State, and Perion Winfrey, who was the number 1 rated junior college defensive tackle in 2020 class, signed with Oklahoma, early enrollee. And I got to talk with him for a little bit before he got on campus. And he's going to Iowa Western Community College because coaches at Iowa State kind of steered him there, thinking that they'd come get him in a couple of years. And he outperformed what he thought was an Iowa State offer, and he was right, ends up in Oklahoma. So they're really good at identifying talent, right? It's just, can they hold on to it to the end? Or are they going to end up the way that Oklahoma did with a Jace McClellan, where Nick Saban shows up in witching hour and flips the kiddo to sign with Alabama? The other story in there is how the evaluation has gone to my eye, right? So here locally, one of my friends is Jerry Ostrowski. His kiddo is Owen Ostrowski, and Owen is a player. He's been a player for some time. He plays at a 2A school here called Holland Hall. But he's picked up offers here in the last 2 weeks from Navy, Army, and then recently Hawaii, right? And what I'm watching is how coaches are really following other offers in a way that I haven't seen before. Look at Kendall Daniels out of Beggs, Oklahoma, which is a place on the map that a lot of people haven't considered. And yet that kiddo had offers from Oklahoma State and OU early, right? And he has family with ties to OU like many people in this state. And then Texas A&M. And then here in the last week, we've seen Clemson come through. We've seen Alabama come through. We've seen Georgia come through. We've seen LSU come through. I think that's how it's going to go. right? I think it's going to be really letting smaller schools that, like you mentioned, like a Texas Tech, or don't have the tradition or the legacy, just try to get out there early and do the work for you. And then you try to come in there and recruit based on what somebody else's evaluation is and how they might see a player that plays in your scheme like they might see one that plays in their scheme. Because, I mean, football, it's all copycat, right? We're all running some version of 4-2-5 now. We're all running some version of three technique or three-man front, not three technique. So I think that's what we're going to look at. But what is interesting is who's going to get a kid to pull the trigger. And if you were really good at talking to kids on the phone, if you're really good at playing Madden with them via these streaming platforms that we have, I think that you could do what Ohio State has done. But I wonder if there are coaches that care enough to try to pull that off right now, or they're, like you say, going to wait for a mad dash to happen in the fall. So I'm interested on that. I ask you to do this for me. Who's your true sophomore redshirt freshman that's going to break out in the Big 12 this year?
Who? True sophomore redshirt freshman. Oh, let me go back and look at that. That would be the 2018 class, right? Or
2019. 2019.
2019.
2019. 2019. So I mean, there's a couple of guys that I could throw out there, but I don't want to poison the water.
No, go for it. I'll keep looking.
Okay, so there are a couple of guys that I think could fit this. Well, obviously, Spencer Rattler is one of them. He has to win the job, but I've basically written him in red ink as a starting quarterback at Oklahoma. He's getting better Heisman odds than Sam Ehlinger, which I thought was ridiculous, but also kind of sort of makes sense if you believe in Lincoln Riley because that's what you're betting on. Jaden Hazelwood is also another one at Oklahoma that I really, really like. But the guy that I'm most interested to see is Jordan Whittington. I want to I'm fascinated by that kiddo as an athlete. I mean, he didn't do a whole lot at his first year because he was hurt, but in the state championship game, I believe it was 334 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns, and then he played on defense and had 11 tackles. I think he had offensive and defensive MVP in a state championship game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he did.
Okay.
Which is insane.
Yeah. And I'm like, what are they going to do with him? I get athlete, but you got to play him somewhere. So, I mean, we're all looking at Rattler. We're all looking at Hazelwood. We're all looking at who we're looking at. But I'm more interested in the guys I haven't seen and the guys that I know were absolute monsters in high school. The Kyler Murrays, if you will. Just the guys that you're like, man, how does that guy not play in the NFL tomorrow? And I think Whittington is one of those.
Yeah, well, and he's obviously a guy, when you talk about Whittington, who a lot of people expected him to kind of do what Roschon Johnson did last year and then some, right? I mean, he was supposed to kind of step in. They moved him from receiver to running back last offseason because of their issues with depth. But, I think that the move is right now is they're planning to move him back to receiver, which is going to be interesting. I mean, he hasn't taken receiver reps in a little while, but you mentioned him. He is just one of those guys who is an insane, crazy athlete. I mean, you just can't almost bet against him because he's so good at what he does. Talking about some other guys, one guy at Baylor who I really liked, who was a guy who did play a little last year, was TJ Franklin.
Yeah. Okay.
He's a guy who played a little bit interior and on the upside. And in a similar way, Gabe Hall as well was another guy who played a lot inside, which is pretty rare to see. Obviously, a guy who's 18 years old playing inside. I mean, that's not really something that happens as a true freshman, but he's the sort of guy that did that. Another guy that you mentioned from Texas last year, Jake Smith. I mean, Jake Smith obviously had a really good first year. He's a lot faster than people sort of maybe think he is. And he's one of those guys who's really, really just good at getting open. He's one of those guys who is a good route runner. He's a guy who has breakaway speed. He's a guy who, last year he was kind of able to be a third receiver, and he dominated in that slot role. And so I'm curious to see what he'll do. One guy in the Big 12 from outside of the States, Brees Hall from Iowa State.
Okay.
I think that's a guy who, to close the year, I mean, he was basically putting up 100 yards a game. And I think that you mix him now with Brock Purdy, who's obviously improved tremendously, and you pair that with a really good defense. I mean, this is what you're looking for, right? Like, this is everything that you want of your Matt Campbell. You want to have your star running back and quarterback and defense to go with it. And I think that Hall really proved last year. Like, I mean, to compare him at this point to David Montgomery is unfair, but we saw how much David Montgomery was able to make that offense go at Iowa State when he was there. I think now heading into his true sophomore year, I mean, I think that this is really the time that he could take a big step.
Jake Smith was the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Arizona the same year that Spencer Rattler was a senior in high school. So just for those you don't know, he is legitimate. And if you watch him, you'll want to throw so many different names over the top of him. I know that because he's white and he's fast and he was a running back, people throw Christian McCaffrey out there. But that also meant Bijan Robinson coming out of there. Man, they're just going to be so good, I think. But they've always been talented at Texas. That's not the problem. If they're ever going to do something, this is the year to do it. I mean, OU's going to be young, going to be inexperienced. You had a total changeover at Baylor, so they're not what we thought they were going to be in December. I mean, this is the year for Texas to be good if they're going to be good. Now, moving to the...
and the other thing that I'll mention real quick is that not only was he Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year, he was National Gatorade Player of the Year.
There you go.
So that's the kind of athlete that
Golly, he's just a I can't wait to see him get more touches. Moving to the 2020 class, right, which is basically done with one exception. And I want to throw this kiddo out here because he's in Texas, and I've had so many questions about him even during this dead period. It's Zach Evans. Right? Coming out of North Shore. I've had him going to Texas A&M. Even when he signed with Georgia, I was like, okay, so he's going to come out of the portal at A&M. Like, I just felt like that was it. And I know that there's a bunch of people that feel the same way about me or about him and feel the same way about me feeling about him. But what is it that, if anything, you've been able to see from him? And what are your reservations other than, I guess the obvious of he seems to not necessarily get it? He seems to be great when you put the ball in his hands. Everything else, you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, the fact that he's still unsigned at this point is kind of insane. There was a point where he was talking about, like, obviously he planned to enroll early. Like, that's the sort of, how much this story has moved. I think this is one of the weirder stories of the past several years. And, look, I think that obviously...
Weirder than Jamar Chase saying that he was going to Kansas there for like a week.
What's that?
Weirder than Jamar Chase saying that he was going to Kansas for like a week. Yeah.
Right. Even weirder than that. Or Kyler Murray tweeting out a Texas jersey.
Oh, man, yeah.
That's the sort of stuff that we're talking about right now. But with Zach, here's the deal, right? I think that if I was a college coach, he is as good a running back prospect as you're going to find. He is complete, It's kind of funny at North Shore, his numbers were only okay, but the reason for that was because like they were dominating everybody. He was just their closer, basically, right? Like he just had to, go out there, dominate for like 10 carries and then go home. Mm-hmm. And he is sort of that total complete running back prospect. Can succeed in short yard, can succeed long yard, can break away, can be that sort of 5-6 yard back too. He is a big time player, and he's done it on the biggest stages. Look. If I were a college coach at one of the top programs, I don't know if I'd want to deal with the headache because he is a player right now who has, first of all, just doesn't know what he wants. The fact that you're going from Georgia to A&M to LSU to all these places that are completely different programs and just kind of saying, I don't know, who knows? Like at this point, when you planned on potentially enrolling in December, I think that's a bad situation. And I think that it also, we've heard like. Is he going to be the sort of guy who's going to be able to keep up his grades? I think that's a big issue that we're going to have to keep an eye on. And I think that, when you look at what Zach Evans is going to do right now, and obviously absolutely none of us know at this point. I think that A&M's off the table for him right now. They kind of went with some other running backs, and I think they're done. The bridge is burned between him and Kirby Smart. He's not going to Georgia. And again, like LSU, they can just pick out their running backs wherever they want. Yeah, I don't think they have to deal with that.
No, they wash their hands early, like in January.
Right. And so, the funny thing is, right, like you look at his 247 page right now, the four teams that are still sort of listed as contenders are A&M, which again, I think isn't happening. And I also think it would be good for him to not be here right now, honestly, just kind of get away from some of the environment he's been in. The other teams that are listed, Florida, which, that's sort of a similar situation where, like, do you need to deal with the headache? Well, let me
jump in because Florida he's probably going to take a visit there, and he was going to in March till this thing happened. I'm going to throw a scenario out because I know this is on the minds of folks that are listening, folks that have been paying attention to this channel religiously. Trey Sermon jumps in the portal, comes out of Ohio State. OU is down to one running back with over 1,000 yards rushing in his career. Right, and Kennedy Brooks. Ramondre Stevenson is suspended for the first 5 games of the season. You don't know what you have in Marcus Major and his shoulder. TJ Pledger hasn't played as much as we thought he would. Seth McGowan's a freshman. Do you think that it's worth taking a flyer to try to get Zach Evans onto campus at Oklahoma, at a place where he would probably touch the ball right away? But are you willing to take the headache? Because, I mean, running back luck at Oklahoma, the only person that hasn't been hit yet is Kennedy Brooks, and I feel like it's about to be his turn.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question.
Okay.
I think that obviously with Kennedy Brooks coming back, you have your guy for 2020 in my opinion, and even when Stevenson obviously is kind of back and gets up to speed, I think that you've got a good rotation there. I don't think that Oklahoma is desperate for running backs, let's say. Now, losing Jace McClellan, I think that was a big deal, obviously. He was going to kind of be that next guy, especially after Kennedy Brooks. But McGowan's a really good player, too. And look, I think that Oklahoma has a really good team culture. I think that Lincoln Riley is a really good communicator, a really good leader. And obviously having a guy like DeMarco Murray now, leading that running back group,
100%.
Maybe that's the type of guy who you really need. A guy who's been there and done that, been the running back for the Dallas Cowboys, done all this stuff. Maybe that's the guy that you need to tell Zach Evans to get his stuff in order, basically. But man, I think that you need to know some things about what you're getting from Zach Evans behind the scenes, like not obviously publicly, before I think that you can feel comfortable that you need to take that chance. Because again, Oklahoma's got running back. I know that obviously it's a shallower room than maybe it's been the past couple of years after losing Sermon, but Oklahoma's got plenty of running backs that are really good, and even other guys at other positions who could switch to running back in a second and be game breakers. So for me, I would say that taking a flyer on a kid that good is always something that you have to at least think about doing. But I don't feel like personally that Oklahoma needs to take that chance. But look, if Lincoln Riley did it, I would certainly not blame him.
Man, I don't know. I just know that I didn't expect Trey Sermon, 1, to go into the portal, and 2, to basically be able to trade up, because that's what it is for me right now. Ohio State is going after a national championship in 2020. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I can't say the same about Oklahoma. It's a bridge year. I believe if OU goes 12-2 and wins a Big 12 championship, you count your blessings, because they're built for 21. They're not built for 20. They sure as hell weren't built for 2019, but made that happen. The last thing I wanted to ask you was, what did you think of the Jalen Hurts era at OU? Because since he's left, some things have come out, some words have been exchanged, and I've been on him as a passer from jump. I didn't believe it, but it feels like even Sermon was a casualty of this, because we saw a quarterback that was much more likely to pull the ball down and carry it than he was to dump it off. We saw a quarterback that was dependent on really one wide receiver, and when he had to another wide receiver, we had 100 passes caught between Charleston Rambo and CeeDee Lamb, and then the next closest person was 19. So what was your thinking of the Jalen Hurts era from a guy that doesn't necessarily be this close to it like I am every year?
Yeah, I think that in a lot of ways the Hurts era went better than I expected in terms of getting to the playoff, winning the Big 12, kind of being able to maintain in my opinion, look, the dude finished second in Heisman voting. I'm not going to say that he was a bad college player by any means, but a guy who was clearly not Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, right? To be able to kind of replace those two guys and still achieve a lot of the same things. No, obviously, there were differences in the team around him and the defense around him especially. But I think that the team performance was pretty good based on what I kind of expected when Hurts came in. And look, I still see people talk about Hurts, potentially being an NFL quarterback now, and I just don't get it, right? Mm-hmm. He's just a guy who, his arm has never really been consistent enough. At Alabama, his freshman year, that was an issue. Of sophomore year, that's why he kind of eventually lost the job. Junior year, he just was a backup, right? Right. That was sort of the whole deal, was that Jalen Hurts was not a good enough passer to be able to really, really, dominate in that aspect at this level. And I think that Lincoln Riley did a phenomenal job of getting the most out of him as a passer. Obviously, both of us watched plenty of Jalen Hurts, and we know that his performance wasn't necessarily as good as the numbers, but look at the numbers. They're insane. The fact that they were able to be as efficient as they were, I think is just such a testament to Lincoln Riley. And And I think that Jalen Hurts was good for Oklahoma as a leader and, as sort of a face of the program because he's a fantastic guy. I mean, I don't think that anybody's questioning that. But, look, I'm not going to go as far as saying like, oh, now they're going to be better with Spencer Rattler because you obviously just don't know. I mean, it's a completely different dynamic. But, I do think that the passing aspect of the game is going to, potentially take a big step next year because, like you mentioned, you're not going to be sort of focusing in on those two guys and kind of not seeing the rest of the field. It's not going to be necessarily a 1 or 2 read offense. It's going to be a little bit more diverse on offense. And again, you mentioned, I mean, I was blown away when I realized how many more carries Jalen Hurts had than everybody else. That's insane to me. And I think that now, you've got a guy in Kennedy Brooks who I think is, a star. I think that he's next in line. I think that he's going to be the next all Big 12 running back and all those things. And now I think having a guy who is a little bit more willing to hand the ball off to his running back who, an insanely good running back. I think that does change the complexion of the offense. Now, again, Spencer Rattler's still a redshirt freshman. I mean, we don't have to put Heisman expectations on him yet, but I do think that the Hurts era will be viewed in a couple of years as, this was a good year. This was a good transition, but I think that its biggest value is eventually going to be that just that Spencer Rattler got that year of development.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. If you're looking at it from the standpoint of you didn't have to burn up a redshirt year for Rattler, then it's a win. Last question that I'll have for you. I know that you're a big fan of college football, just period, that you're the guy who would much rather watch Mason Fine do a thing than figure out who's going to play in the college football playoff. I get that. But who's going to win the national championship this year?
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think that you look at the teams that are going to compete for the top 4. I think that there are, once again, 3 teams that are going to be above everybody else. And unfortunately, for the second year in a row, I think it's going to be the same 3 teams, right? And, so I think that Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State are best poised to do that. Look, and I think that each has their own advantages. I think that, Clemson has as much talent as anybody, obviously, and I think that they'll be motivated to come back after what happened last year. And I think that, Alabama, I mean, I think that they're back in the playoff. I don't think that there's a whole lot of question about that, in my opinion. I think they take LSU's place. And look, that receiver room, I mean, they lost 2 potential first-round receivers, and they still got Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, which is just so unfair. And I think that the defense will actually be a lot better, too, with what they have coming back. And then Ohio State, I mean, they probably have, I don't want to say the best quarterback in the bunch because one of the teams has Trevor Lawrence too, but he is a dynamic player, Justin Fields is. And I think that Trey Sermon getting added to that mix along with what they have on defense, I mean, I think that they're really, really good. If I had to pick a team right now to win the national title, I think I'm going to pick Clemson, but any of those 3 teams, I think it's going to be one of those 3 teams. I don't think there's going to be an LSU surprise team this year.
No, man, I picked Alabama in January. I'm going to stick with that because I really love what they return on defense. Like you mentioned, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, but there's also a Najee Harris who decided to come back.
Yeah.
Drew Sanders has an opportunity to help them out defensively, but I'm interested to see if Kirby Smart will take the handcuffs off of Todd Monken and let Stuart Brand Cam Newton do something. Because that week 3 matchup is going to be fun, but it's by no means going to be what we expected. That one I think is going to have more to say about who's playing a national championship game than anything else. Kind of like Texas LSU became that game for us last year. We didn't know it at the time. We all thought it was cool, but I didn't know that was how close Texas was. So while I'm picking Alabama to win the national championship, I think Georgia could be there if Monken and Stuart Brand Cam Newton, Jamie Newman, could figure out some things because they just got a stable of backs back there. But Texas, you ought to be able to do something this year. And Oregon, I think Oregon could be good. I'm going to get to see them against Ohio State, but Ohio State's going to be Ohio State. So that, I think it's going to be really fun to see basically 3 through about 12, right? I think those are going to be fun teams to watch. I don't even know if Oklahoma's going to be one of them. I'm being very clear-eyed about that. I know that I catch a lot of hell about it. And I know that, I came to this as an OU fan and then everything else kind of blew up. But hey, Shehan, man, you're so cool. Thank you so much. You're so knowledgeable. You're so fun to talk to. You gave us an hour of your time. I so appreciate this, man.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me. I know that, look, I think that all of us are looking for something to talk about during this period. This was a lot of fun.
Right on. That's Shehan Jeyarajah, insider at Dave Campbell, Texas Football. Give him a follow on the Twitters at Shehan Jeyarajah. Read his work. Subscribe to the magazine. I do. And I can't wait to get my magazine in the mail this summer. Lord willing, we have college football. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.